Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Campus Worship. I'm Chaplain Brian Martin Burkholder, or Brian is fine. For those who are welcoming people, just to know there are seats up front, in the middle, on the sides, so come on up, and those of you who are scanning IDs, send people on up because there's lots of seats. It'd be good to be closer, and part of the conversation in that way. So for Campus Worship, we are continuing our What's Your Story series today, and this space is intended to be an invitational space for worship and Christian traditions. The What's Your Story features people's sense of a developing sense of call and vocation throughout their lives, and we often are hearing from faculty and staff. To honor the intentions of hearing story and connecting with story, we ask you to put screens away, phones, computers, laptops, whatever you've got, iPads, just to honor the 50 minutes of worship time. Today we'll hear from Dr. Kathy Evans. There'll be an introduction in just a minute, so I'll let Rose do that. Rose, come on up. The title of today's talk is on the screen right now, on basketball breaches and bridges, short stories from the journey. Naming basketball is timely as the teams just started their official training. Is anyone a basketball player in the room right now? And yeah, I'm impressed that you're here. It's a pretty tight schedule, I'm told. The prompts for the What's Your Story reflections are as such. Who or what impacted and inspired your sense of who you were growing up? What gave you meaning? Or how has your faith and spirituality informed your sense of calling and vocation? And by that we mean purpose and meaning. And how are you continuing to lean into the fullness of your sense of call and vocation in your present work and life? We'll have an introduction of Dr. Evans, and then a few songs of worship, a scripture passage selected by Kathy, and then we'll hear your story. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad to be able to introduce Kathy Evans this morning. Dr. Kathy Evans has been a professor in teacher education at EMU since 2011. She teaches courses in educational psychology, inclusive education, and restorative justice in education. She holds a PhD in educational psychology and research from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, where her dissertation research employed phenomenological interviews with middle school students and their experiences with in-school suspension. Prior to graduate school, Evans was a middle and high school special educator for students identified as having learning, behavioral, and emotional challenges. Her research in creating more just and equitable educational opportunities for all students, including those with disability labels, those who exhibit challenging behavior, and those who are marginalized for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to ability, language, religion, race, gender, sexuality, and economics. While at EMU, Kathy has been active in furthering the field of restorative justice in education, both through scholarship and teaching, by working collaboratively with colleagues and local educators to develop both a master's concentration and a graduate certificate in RJE. Kathy has published several articles and book chapters related to zero tolerance policies, restorative justice, and school discipline practices, regularly presents at professional conferences. She is a co-author of the Little Book of Restorative Justice in Education. Now I invite you guys to stand as we sing both of our songs this morning.
For the scripture reading this morning, I will be reading Isaiah 58, 6 through 14. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong, and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt, and you shall rise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in.
So, good morning. One thing you should know about me is I sometimes speak with my face, so if you look away, you might miss something fun. It was 1976. I was 10 years old and desperately trying to make sense of this thing called Christianity. I remember wondering how a God who epitomized love could send someone for hell for not believing the right things. And one morning I remember asking my mom, why do people hate the devil? It seemed to me that God and the devil were actually partners in the game. God got all the good people on his team, the devil got all the bad people on his team, and life was this competition to see who won. Remember, I was 10. My curiosity was met with this soon-to-be familiar line, "You're too young to understand that right now. Just remember, God's ways are always higher than ours. God is all-knowing, and God is all-powerful." And I internalized that as, just don't ask questions. And it'll all be okay. Except that it wasn't, it never was. Following God's will meant following all the rules. Those of you that know me know I'm not good at that. And I tried so hard to do that, but I kept failing miserably. And none of it made sense to me, but I knew better than to question it all. So I just kept working harder, trying to be good. It was 1984 before I was able to rekindle that curiosity about Christianity. I was a first-year student at Baylor University, learning all kinds of things that would make for some funny stories in another forum. College had opened a window, many windows actually, into new experiences, new information, other perspectives, things I hadn't learned about in my Southern Baptist church. And with those questions came all kinds of reasons to stop trying to be so good. It's not an unfamiliar story, I know, but it's still my story, and it's an important part of my journey. So those first 3 years at Baylor were a little bit rocky, but by the time I was a senior in 1988, I had figured things out. I was volunteering at a juvenile detention center, hanging out with incarcerated youth, and I was finding my faith deeply connected to helping others. I was a special ed major with a minor in sociology, not because I wanted to be a teacher, mind you, but because after changing my major literally 5 times in the registrar's office, teaching was the quickest path to graduation. and I'd started attending church again. One day after church, a friend tapped me on the shoulder and handed me an offering envelope with this passage from Isaiah written on it. I can explain offering envelopes to some of you later if you need me to. The short explanation is that this is how you gave money to your church before there was Venmo. Anyway, my friend told me that during the prayer time, she felt that God wanted her to share this passage with me. I read it. I liked the verses about being a well-watered garden or repairer of the breach. Sounds nice, but not life-changing, at least not at the time. So I put the piece of paper in my Bible, and occasionally I'd pull it out and read it, but eventually it became one of many pieces of paper in that Bible, pieces of paper that accumulated along with church bulletins and sermon notes and gum wrappers. There's the envelope. It was 2004. After being a youth minister for 9 years, I became a special ed teacher for 8 years. And I worked out my faith by serving children with disabilities. Still trying to save my place on God's good team, I attended church regularly, I taught a youth Sunday school class, and I volunteered with various ministries in town, but I had questions. Why were the students with disabilities suspended more often than non-identified students? In my predominantly white high school, why were most of those in the self-contained special education class students of color? Why were we only providing supports for students with special needs and not empowering them for their own self-determination? And why were the students in my special education classes motivated to do just about anything other than learn English? Without having language to talk about it yet, I found myself beginning to notice some of the injustices in our special education system. And so I went for a PhD in educational psychology, as you do. It was the fall of 2006. I had just started my second year at the University of Tennessee working toward a PhD in educational psychology, trying to figure out still that whole motivation thing. Some colleagues had been spending time with a Burundi community in Knoxville, supporting their transition to the US and walking with them as they navigated some of those barriers to getting settled into their new lives. I wanted to get involved, so I signed on to adopt a family. At first, it was mostly non-committal, going out when it was convenient, still trying to do good things, what I might consider today as performative solidarity. But Christmas was coming, and I'd heard that one of the boys said he wanted a basketball. So I decided to put together my own personal angel tree project. I went shopping. I bought him a nice basketball. I bought some clothes for his mom and his sister, some colors and paints for his little sister, a fishing rod and some tackle for his big brothers. I threw in some gift cards for good measure and a Christmas card, and I was ready to go. I called my friend Jessica, and I asked when she might want to go with me and deliver the presents. After a long silence, the conversation went something like this. "So what's your plan?" she asked. "Well, to take them to Christmas." "Oh, wait. Should we wait till closer to Christmas? Are they going to want to open them when we go? Or are they going to want to leave them under the tree for a little while and open them on Christmas Day?" There was a long pause. And then very graciously, Jessica asked, "How do you know they celebrate Christmas?" That had never occurred to me. I stumbled an explanation, and then she said, "What do you do about the other children in the neighborhood?" Well, I can't give presents to everyone. Maybe we should find some other folks, and they can adopt other families and buy them Christmas presents. "So are you going to just go and drop them off and then what, leave?" Yeah, I suppose that's kind of what I was thinking. And over the course of a few really uncomfortable conversations, began to understand how my own assumptions about what those people needed had led me to do good things for them without actually seeking their input or acknowledging their agency. Later, I would understand the concept of white savior complex and how power, masquerading as helping, is still power, and power over at that. I never delivered those Christmas presents. They sat in my house for a while, reminding me of my own tendency to swoop in, do good, only briefly leaving my life of comfort and safety, my positions of privilege and power. That Christmas, I remember singing a lot about Emmanuel, and the God who didn't swoop in temporarily, but rather the God who moved into our world to be with us. It was the spring of 2007. I was at a family reunion in Bern, Indiana, having a conversation with a cousin who had just graduated with a master's degree in restorative justice. It was the first time I had heard those two words together, and I was intrigued, particularly because my doctoral studies, I had found myself researching school discipline practices. And the research was super clear that exclusionary discipline, suspensions and expulsion, was bad for students and had negative outcomes, but I hadn't found much in the way of alternatives. This restorative justice concept sounded interesting, so I asked Jen if anyone was doing anything like that in school settings. She suggested that I read a book by Judy Mollett and Lorraine Stutzman-Amstutz entitled The Little Book of Restorative Discipline in Schools. I wrote down the title, I read the book, and I never looked back. At the time, very little had been written about RJ in school settings, and so I set out to take the values, the principles, and practices of RJ that had been applied in the criminal legal system and apply them to school settings. I was attending church at the time in Knoxville, and the church's theme was seeking the peace of the city. It was a community-oriented church that centered notions of grace, shalom, social justice, and the restoration of all things to their created design, wholeness, healing, reconciliation. I began to think about restorative justice through this lens of my faith, and my faith through the lens of restorative justice, and finally had the courage to return to that 10-year-old's question about how a God who epitomized love could actually send someone to hell. Began asking questions about justice and what does a shalom justice look like? My restorative justice journey just pushed me further to interrogate how we relate to those around us, how we view the stranger, including ourselves, and our relationships, and the institutions that have perpetuated injustices and caused harm and violence in our world. As I continued to ponder this seamless consistency of restorative justice as an approach to school discipline with these biblical mandates to be ministers of reconciliation and peace builders, I found myself wondering, what would it look like for followers of Jesus who were educators to partner with God to bring about shalom on earth and in the classroom? Places where righteousness and justice are the foundations, where love reigns and institutional injustices are torn down and replaced with mercy and justice and humility, where youth who've been pushed to the margins of society, sometimes by me, are restored to community. And then there it was, randomly flittering out of my Bible one day, that envelope. You will be a well-watered garden. You will rebuild the ancient ruins. You'll be called a repairer of the breach and the restorer of streets with dwelling. It was the fall of 2011, and I had just arrived at EMU, eager to teach future teachers and curious about how restorative justice would be part of that work. We began conversations about starting a new graduate program in restorative justice and education, and while it was a new idea, people seemed genuinely interested in exploring the possibilities. Things seemed to be moving in a really good direction. I loved teaching college students at a small liberal arts college, infused with the teachings of Jesus. It all seemed to fit until it didn't. It was 2013, 2 years into my stay at EMU, the president and the board of trustees announced that there was going to be and I'm going to put the thing down so you can see me go, listening process, where we conducted circle processes, sorta. And the question would be, how would your life be different if we changed the hiring policy to allow for the hiring of openly LGBTQ faculty and staff? I had known I was gay for only just a few years. I like to say that earlier in my life, it wasn't on my drop-down list of options. And now, here I was at EMU, faced with a decision to either come out or stay closeted. I decided to participate in the listening process, but only if I could engage openly. Y'all, it was scary. Every conversation was its own coming out, over and over to groups of people who were not always affirming. There were lectures from people on both sides of the issue, and book groups where people debated whether or not queer people could actually be Christians. Students held candlelight vigils, MCUSA conferences, debated whether to allow LGBTQ plus folks to be church members, and the work to build a restorative justice graduate program fell to the wayside as I waited for the outcome of all of this controversy. After over a year of conversations and more than 7,000 survey responses, the board announced the results. While a majority of internal stakeholders, faculty, staff, and students, supported the change in policy, an overwhelming majority of external stakeholders, parents, alumni, faith leaders, did not. Despite the findings, in the June of 2014, the president of EMU and the president's cabinet boldly sent a recommendation to the board to change the hiring policy and allow for LGBTQ plus faculty and staff to be eligible for employment. Initially, the board announced that it would delay its decision, declaring that they wanted to give the broader church a bit more time for discernment. So there was more waiting, more debate, more discussion, and finally in 2015, EMU changed its hiring policy, allowing for the hiring of queer people and making it possible for me to stay. In the meantime, I was also doing the work of coming out to my family, which was not an easy process. And I'm sure that without the principles and values of restorative justice to guide me, I wouldn't still be in a relationship with them. It was hard for a while, super messy. There were angry words, fearful words, harmful words. We got through it, but I would confess that getting through it is still a daily commitment to healing, forgiveness, and, dare I say, forbearance. It was April of 2017. It was just a basketball game. It was an amazing basketball game. It was the women's Final Four, and it was still just a basketball game. Mississippi State had had a great season, ranked second in their division, and now up against UConn, ranked first in the nation. UConn had won 111 straight games. No one in the world expected MSU to win. And yet here we were at the end of regulation play, tied at 60. This game is going into overtime. It's this classic David versus Goliath scenario. Mississippi women had never to the Final Four. So the significance in the sporting world was evident to everyone, and the headlines read things like, "Itty Bitty blasts Goliath," speaking of Morgan Williams, all of 5'5", and her last-minute buzzer shot to win the game. If you stay around after, you get to see that shot. It was exciting to say the least. But what few people knew was the significance of this moment for me. My family had gathered earlier that evening for my mom's 76th birthday. The whole family was there. We'd spent the day fishing at the farm, followed by, yes, 39 pounds of crawfish, along with all of the fixins. You know, the way you do a country boil in South Mississippi. We'd had pound cake and bluebell ice cream. We'd ridden the four-wheeler. The niece and nephews had played in the creek. We had a picnic overlooking the pond. It had been a great day overall. This moment with my family, watching Mississippi topple the women's basketball giant, it was epic for so many reasons. 3 years prior to that basketball game, in that very same backyard, I had made the very difficult decision to come out to my family. We'd always been close, sharing similar religious and political views, but my PhD studies had challenged some of those unasked questions and opened my eyes to things that I couldn't unsee. The shift in my political orientation and my spiritual commitments included moving towards pacifism, deconstructing Western perspectives of Christianity, considering other faith perspectives, and seeing Jesus following as about breaking the yokes of oppression rather than as converting people to my particular brand of Christianity. I had shifted, and that shift had created havoc in my family. So in 2014, that peace was already fragile, and I was certain that my coming out could potentially destroy whatever was left. But I couldn't hide any longer. It was eating me alive. And so I chose authenticity over harmony. That night in 2014 had been an absolute disaster. I filtered that for convocation. It had been such a difficult decision, and the response was something that I had feared would happen. But here we are 3 years later, in 2017 at this basketball game. After opening Pandora's box, we're watching this game, and together we are a family again. We sat around tables and ate crawfish, y'all. We had bluebell ice cream. I don't even know what bluebell ice cream is. And pound cake. And we watched Mississippi State beat UConn. And we cheered excessively together. I don't know how to explain it, but it was such a redemptive moment. Who knew that basketball could be such an act of peace building, of bridge making? It wasn't all that was needed for healing, but it was enough in that moment to begin repairing the breach and rebuilding streets with dwelling. It was October of 2025. Yes, that was 2 weeks ago. I had the opportunity to attend a conference and hear Kazu Haga talk about fractals. Fractals, think universe, hurricanes, fern fronds. This idea that whether you zoom way out or zoom way in, that the pattern is still the same. Haga reminded us and reminded me that things that happen small, at that very smallest level, mirror the things happening at the big level. Nothing is actually small. Everything matters. That basketball game was the beginning of healing for my family. It's a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but the ripple effects continue to manifest in my life and my vocation in larger ways. They remind me that we can indeed repair the breach. We can heal the ruptures. We can rebuild broken things, including relationships. Restorative justice is grounded on that type of relational healing. Of course, it's not enough, but it's enough of a beginning to get us unstuck so that together we can do the next thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are some big, ginormous things happening all around us right now. Icky, harmful, evil things. But if Haggai is right, every small thing that we do to topple those things, to resist those icky things, all those things matter. Every time we encourage our friends, every time we forgive someone who's harmed us, every time we plant a tree or smile at a child or play with our pets, Every time we laugh together over a meal or cry together in collective grief, every time we lift up the voices and perspectives of those who've been silenced or remember a history that has been erased, every time we create spaces where justice and equity are embodied, every time we prioritize our healing and our well-being, every time we treat people with dignity and not shame, every time we choose love over fear, all those times matter. Yes, of course we still need to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline and fight the patriarchy. We need to tackle white supremacy and challenge our commitment to capitalism. We need to rewrite policies and we need to rewrite history books. We need to loose the bonds of injustice and to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke. There are dry places that need eternal springs of water. There are dead places that need life. There are broken walls that need to be rebuilt. There are unjust institutions that need to be torn down. There are streets, literal streets, where children live that need to be restored. These principles haunt me when I find myself just going through the motions of academia. When I find myself overwhelmed with mundane tasks that don't seem to contribute to that larger vision, I'm reminded there's big work to do. But for today, maybe it's enough simply to be a well-watered garden in a parched land. Thank you.
Powerful, deeply meaningful, inspiring, and I invite you now to turn to one or two others around you and talk a little bit. This is a standard for the What's Your Story series. What's one intriguing thing you heard? It could be provocative, challenging, inspiring, intriguing. And what's one question you have for Kathy? And there may well be time for us to take a few questions. So yeah, talk a bit. If you're sitting alone, at least be reflecting on these things. Consider it. All right, I know I could give you more time. I'd also want to invite Kathy back up here. And if you have a question, raise your hand or stand up. Shauna has a mic. We're using the microphone because we're also live streaming today, and this service will be posted on EMU's YouTube channel. It's not time to go yet. Let's stay in the conversation. What questions, comments, invitations do you have in response? And I would encourage you to stand as you ask the question, just so that we can all be better oriented.
I was curious what you do when you feel those mundane tasks overwhelming you and it's harder to see how they connect to the big things.
That's a really great question. You should ask my team. I go fishing. I try to get my head back in a space where I realize like those small things matter. I think I work hard to find meaning in some of those tasks. Some of them it's more difficult. And sometimes I share the load with people who find those tasks meaningful in ways that I don't, which is always really nice to work collaboratively with people who have different interests and skills than you.
Hello. Okay. I just wanted to say that you're great, and I loved your story. And I really found everything that you said really interesting, especially because you don't really see that many people kind of do a deep dive on kind of like adolescent behaviors and how that can affect their education. And all the research that you've done, all the work, it is big, and I see that, and I feel like so many people here do today. Yeah.
Thank you. What was your name?
My name is Christian.
Thank you, Christian.
Kathy, I was curious about how you got to EMU, and I wondered if Judy Mullet and the book had anything to do with that.
It was everything. So I read the Little Book of Restorative Discipline in schools, and that led me to Howard's book. Judy particularly likes that comment because most of the time it's the other way. Howard gets the props, and then they find Judy along the way. No, I read Judy's book and Judy and Lorraine's book, and that took me to Howard's book, and then it just opened up. And then somehow or another, I stumbled on the Summer Peace Building Institute, and I decided I wanted to be a part of an organization that prioritized peace and justice. Maybe I can come to this little place, and I did, and I'm really excited. But this is my 15th year. It's hard to believe. Crazy.
If you would join me in sharing appreciation with Kathy, for Kathy. The conversation continues. The conversation always continues. I invite you to share with those friends of yours and family, whoever, who weren't here. If you think that something here might inspire them, empower them, encourage them, then point them to the EMU YouTube channel. We are eager to hear if you have suggestions for other people for us to invite for the What's Your Story Campus Worship series. Here's one of the ways that you can let us know. You can also email me, Brian Burkholder at EMU, or spirituallife@emu.edu, or talk to me or any of the student chaplains. We would love to have and you could nominate yourself as well if you'd like. And then just to know that we have a number of things going on this week. I think we'll skip right to our campus announcements, and after this, you're free to go. Sergio.
Hello guys. So campus announcements. So the first one in the evening at 8 p.m. hymn sing. It will be right here in this room, and we'll actually have food for tonight too for hymn sing. So it'll be from 8 to 9ish. So yep, you should come. And then as well after this, at 11:45, we have the Celebrate India as well. That will be in the student union, and then there'll be music, chai, food, the snacks. It'll be fun. So then after that, there'll be gospel choir practice as well. It's really like fun to if you're a bow, you don't have to be a tenor necessarily, but if you're a bass, that works too. So so that's how it started off. So So then ENC large group 7 to 8 as well in the UC 177. So you guys are welcome to go there too. And then this Friday for FSL there'll be a student-led Bible study by me. So from 10:10 to 11:15 in Campus Center, like long areas. So you guys are welcome to go there on Friday. And then the next thing on Sunday, there will be celebrations to lead in the same room as pretty much ENC, UC 177. So you guys should come. There's usually like snacks as well. So from 7 to 9 p.m. And yeah, that's all the announcements. Thank you for listening.
Shooting foul shots, makes the first. She's 84%. She'll have another one coming.